2016. Roll call.
Dickman here.
Johnston here.
Brillo here.
Kavich here.
Skavita here.
Guzikowski here. Corral here.
Shaper here.
Chandler here.
Welcome to our audience. Item 2 is minutes of the April 26, 2016 meeting.
Dickman makes a motion that we approve the minutes of the April 26, 2016 meeting.
Shaper seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston aye.
Brillo, aye.
Kavich aye.
BDI.
Guzikowski aye.
Corral abstains.
Shaper aye.
Chandler, aye.
Changed mine to abstain. I wasn't at the last meeting. I want to be accurate. Item 3 is significant common council actions.
Common Council approved the following: an ordinance approving a conditional use amendment for the property at 6819 South Howell Avenue, which would allow for the operation of a private bus service storage yard. Also, a resolution approving a certified survey map for the properties at 6871, 6881, 6881R, 6933, 6939, and 6955 South 13th Street. Also approved a professional services agreement with R.A. Smith National for wetland permitting, staking, and detailed infrastructure plans and specifications for the Phase 2 extension of South 20th Street. Also approved a resolution approving the Second Amendment to the Tax Incremental District Number 11 Finance Development Agreement by and between the City of Oak Creek and Oak Creek Medical Developer, Inc., and a resolution approving the Parking and Access Agreement by and between the City of Oak Creek and Oak Creek Medical Developer, Inc. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Under 4A, item new business. 4A is the conditions and restrictions for a planned unit development for the properties at 7721 South Pennsylvania Avenue and 2100, 2200, 2280 East Drexel Avenue, submitted by HSI Oak Creek Partners LLC on behalf of Mary Volker, Margaret Munson, and Life Creek Church, Inc. Text key numbers as listed. Carrie?
As Plan Commissioners will recall, this conditional use permit, actually it's not a conditional use permit, it's a rezone and plan unit development, was recommended for approval at the last meeting. And tonight we are going over the conditions and restrictions that are proposed by staff. If you'll turn to page 2 of 11 of the conditions and restrictions, call your attention to section I, which just limits the number of multifamily buildings to 20 and the number of units to 290, also recognizes the accessory buildings that are proposed. Any increase in the number of multifamily buildings or units shall require an amendment to the conditions and restrictions. Under 3A, parking and access, a traffic impact analysis shall be performed and submitted to the engineering department for review prior to the submission of applications for Plan Commission review of Phase 1 plans, including but not limited to site, building, landscaping, and lighting. On page 3 of 11, section I, parking shall be located in a garage or carport or on a driveway that does not exceed 24 feet in width. This is just basically copying from the code what the parking requirements are. Page 5 of 11, section M, all landscaping within a phase shall be in place prior to the issuance of an occupancy permit for any building within that phase. I want to come back to that and have a small discussion about it. Page 6 of 11, building height, area, and density standards under 7. I want to draw your attention to the subsection B. No accessory buildings shall exceed 17 feet in height. This is per code, and there is a request by the applicant, and we will come back to that as well. Under section 8, building and parking setbacks, that's for the plan unit development. This also recognizes that there are buffer requirements next to single-family districts. Page 7 of 11, under section 11, permitted uses, recognizing that this is a multifamily residential zoning district. It's also a plan unit development. Permitted uses include 20 multifamily residential buildings in excess of 4 dwelling units per structure, not to exceed 290 total units at a density not to exceed 9.7 dwelling units per net acre. Under section 12, time of compliance, this is where I'd like the Plan Commission to have a little bit of input as well. In fact, I'll just talk about this one right away. Code requires that a building permit be issued within 12 months of approval. However, this is a multi-phase project, and after speaking with the applicants, there is a request for an extension. What the extension request is 18 months prior for the issuance of a building permit for from the ordinance authorizing the PUD. So in other words, they would have 18 months from council approval to obtain a building permit application for Phase 1, or for a permit for Phase 1. Phase 2 is, the request is for 48 months from the date of adoption of the PUD. So in other words, 48 months from the date of the Common Council's approval for the issuance of a building permit for Phase 2. Normally, again, it's 12 months. What I'd like to get the Plan Commission's feeling on is the request, and also just pointing out that Azura, which was a multifamily residential project, granted it was a CBRF project, they had a multi-phase plan in place. They were given 12 months to get a building permit for Phase 1 and 36 months to get a building permit for Phase 2. They did come back and ask for an extension of 1 year for the Phase 1 because they had a little bit of problems, some problems with their plans. But that's a comparison for the Plan Commission to consider with regard to this request for time of compliance. So it's a comparable. Are there any thoughts from the Plan Commission as to whether or not the 18 months and 48 months are acceptable?
Alderman Bekavich?
I guess I'll speak first. I don't have a problem with it. Being in development and building, it does take some time to get these things going. The difference between Phase 1 and Phase 2 comes down to financing sometimes with occupancy rates and what have you. A lot of things can delay a project by a little bit. So I don't have a problem with the 48 to obtain a second phase.
Other comments on that? Commissioner Dickman?
I do agree with the 18 months and 48, but I'm concerned the way it's worded, Carrie. Could they build Phase 1 and then decide not to build Phase 2?
Yes.
Okay, so there's nothing we can put in here to, make sure that the process works so that they do build Phase 2? Or is it all based on what they can afford?
What this says is if they don't get a building permit within 48 months for Phase 2, they would have to come back to get any approvals before they could move forward. There is a section under D that talks about expiration for Phase 1 only with the zoning reverting back. I'm not sure how the Plan Commission feels about that, but I can tell you that a majority of the project is in Phase 1. So all the public amenities, the pool, the clubhouse, the proposed gazebo, the walking paths, and most of the apartment buildings are in Phase 1. I want to say something like maybe six of the buildings are in Phase 2.
Okay, so if they put Phase 1 in, it's for all practical purposes, they've completed the main items that they're proposing.
It may be like 7 or 8, but actually, yeah, a majority of the project is in Phase 1.
Okay, thank you.
One more thing.
Go ahead.
Keep in mind, it's in the developer's best interest to do both phases because the more units he has, the better his financial plan looks.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's based on. It ain't based on just Phase 1. It's based on the overall plan, and the density that he has per unit. So there's a lot of incentive for him to get Phase 2 in.
Need a pause there, Gary? All right, so the question is, on the 12 months versus whatever the extension was they're looking for, it doesn't change the process, it just delays the amount of time before they have to come back, correct?
6 months.
Commissioner Correll?
Yeah, bottom line, 18 months to get a project of this size. The majority of the work is in Phase 1. That's our biggest concern. Give them 18 months to get it right. I have no problem with that. The 48 months, whoever stated it's in the developer's best interest, they don't follow through. It's really on their end. We've got all the amenities, less density. So I don't see a problem with either extension.
Commissioner Chandler?
I do have a question for the applicant. Why we don't have it set up for 12 months, and then if you need the extension to come back? and make that request?
My name is Tony DeRosa, 18500 West Corporate Drive in Brookfield. The reason for that, when I had this conversation with Ms. Papelbon, this approval, this timeframe would start once the ordinance would be approved, which at the current schedule would be next month in June. And when you look at all the planning, the engineering, the architectural drawings, full bidding, bringing on contractors, financing, putting all that together, you may be ready to start early, but you may be in a position where it's the middle of winter and you're not going to start construction, or you're in the middle of a really wet spring and you get delayed. Things never quite go perfectly scheduled when you're trying to get to a closing. So that's why we thought let's tee this up for success now rather than having to come back, because by the time 12 months may be up if we've not started, which we're not anticipating. We're very deep financially into this project, and we want to make sure that we have enough runway to have a successful project and break ground on it.
Thank you.
Which 6 buildings are we talking about being the first ones? To the west?
First or the second phase?
First phase.
First phase is on the east.
Oh, okay. And then plus that public area, whatever you call
Right.
it. Okay. Any other heartburn on the time extension? Not hearing anything.
Okay, if I could get the Plan Commission to go back to page 6 of 11. 7B, accessory buildings in excess of 17 feet in height. There is a request because of the height of the proposed clubhouse. I will defer to the applicant.
Thank you. We envision that the clubhouse will have some taller features to it, may have a small tower component. 17 feet is really more of a pitched roof on a garage. With the 2-story building, typically you're going to be closer to 25 to 30 feet. And so we may have open air sections of the clubhouse, and where this could be, we could have a tower element that could be 20 feet tall or 25 feet tall. It's not going to be any taller than any of our 2-story buildings, but I also think this provides for a little more architectural flavor with the building. If we're limited to 17 feet, the building's going to be ugly. I mean, that's the reality of the architecture behind that.
Any questions or concerns on that? Alderman Bekavich?
Mr. DeRosa, the clubhouse it's one of the closer buildings off Drexel. What's the grade drop to about where its location is? Are we talking 3 feet?
No,
5
we're talking probably 10 feet
10 feet from Drexel Avenue.
from the portion of Drexel directly south, and probably more as you go further to the west.
So where the clubhouse sits, 10 feet?
Yeah, roughly plus or minus 10 feet.
So, I mean, even if we go higher with it, really, from road height, even if you went 27 feet, you're still at 17 from road height.
Correct. And the architecture has to come back before the Plan Commission, regardless of whether it's 17 feet or higher.
Anything else on that one? Commissioner Chandler?
So where's the location of the clubhouse? And what's the actual height that you're gearing towards, if not 17 feet?
I don't have a specific height in mind at this point because we haven't worked through the architectural design of the clubhouse. But it may look like a 2-story building, or may have a component that appears like a 2-story building, but it also going to be the clubhouse itself will be single-story.
And where is its location? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Johnston?
Would we accept out just the clubhouse and leave the 17-foot height language in there, or would it just be a blanket statement to basically eliminate that accessory structure height?
That's a consideration for the Plan Commission, but I would ask how tall the gazebo is.
I don't have an answer for that at this point.
Would the gazebo likely exceed 17 feet?
I would assume no. We don't have a design for it, but I would assume no. I'd be comfortable limiting this to, or modifying this to carve out the clubhouse and keeping accessory buildings at 17 feet. If that's the desire of the Plan Commission, that would be acceptable.
I would ask that the Plan Commission assign a maximum height for the clubhouse in that case.
Okay. Everybody comfortable with that? Commissioner Seibert?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to phase 1. How many units are you building in phase 1, and where are they located?
Sure. Phase 1 has approximately 12 buildings, which would represent approximately 160 plus or minus units of the overall project. So over 50% of the project. So it's roughly the east half of the property.
Thank you.
Commissioner Correll?
I guess if there's a recommendation on the height, but this comes back before us at some point when we see the actual plan. So I think from an architectural standpoint, we want them to do something with the clubhouse where the grade is. I don't think it's a problem for sightline. So I think we keep it exclusive to the clubhouse, and I don't know how we really put a cap on it, not seeing anything. We've got another shot at it.
Barry?
Well, I would say that you should put a limit on the height for the conditions and restrictions because we do have that requirement for accessory buildings not to exceed 17 feet. So
A recommendation, Carrie, then, I mean, based on where
it would
10
be,
feet down,
well, it would be up to a maximum. So if you would say, you know, not to exceed 30 feet in height, for instance, that would assume that it wouldn't be any taller than the rest of the buildings on the
are
property.
you comfortable with that?
That's fine.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dickman?
Let's see, Carrie, I still want to talk about the one. If we take that item 7B and keep it no accessory building, but just add, except for the clubhouse, which can be a maximum of, what'd you say, 30 feet? Would that be okay?
Well, I was just throwing a number out there for the plan commission to consider, but yes, I can certainly add some language in there so that at the council meeting, we have something that they can look at.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan. Anything else on that?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Aid. The last item that I wanted to talk about is on page 511, subsection M. The applicant has made a request that we have a little bit of flexibility with regard to occupancy. The reason being the request is, if I understand it correctly, to be able to use the buildings as they become available and are finished. Am I correct?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Right now, the code requires that the landscaping be in place, everything be complete prior to issuing an occupancy permit. So going building by building is a bit different, although I have spoken with the inspection department and it is doable. There would be some concerns that staff would have with regard to that, so we would want to have an agreement in place about what exactly would be required for each portion to get an occupancy permit. So we don't have the exact language in M right now, but I just wanted to bring that to the Plan Commission's attention that there is some ongoing discussion about how to handle that section.
So how do you have one area completed with a active construction zone and you have people comfortably moving around? It seems a little bit problematic.
But that's where it gets into certain sections that would have to be completed prior to issuance of that first occupancy permit. We'd have to discuss what items had to be in place before that could happen.
Okay. So talk to me about the landscaping. You don't want to landscape all of the areas.
Right, so this ties in with landscaping as well as parking. That's referenced in section 3 sub E. These buildings are delivered within a phase. We have sub phases. So we would start construction on phase 1, and within 10 months we'd be ready to deliver the first building, the first 2 buildings. And if that were to occur at a time of year where getting landscaping in around that building, maybe problematic, could be January, or the balance within the phase, the other buildings had not been completed yet. Therefore, we've not landscaped them. Therefore, we've not put in the parking lot around some of those other sub-pockets or groupings of other buildings. So what I've done successfully in other communities where we work with city staff and the city engineering department and incorporate into, whether it's the development agreement or any other document, here's what the requirements are going to be of when you come asking for occupancy, you have to have these things all in place. And we're open to that, rather than having to say the entire first phase has to be completely landscaped and all of the paving has to be completely installed.
Other than the timing of the phases and everything, you have no objections to the landscape requirements for the project?
Do not.
Questions?
But if it was open up phases, so if we look at the first group of buildings, the first four, the block, I guess, or hit to the west there, the road across from the clubhouse. What if, once that's complete, it's opened up and then you move on? You wouldn't phase it that way.
I think that's just a discussion that staff would have to have with the applicant. I'll be honest, we just kind of we touched base on this last week, I think. So I haven't been able to come up with a exact kind of phrasing for this yet, but I just wanted to run it past the Plan Commission. We will work with the applicant on an agreement so that everybody understands what is required of them and at what time it is required.
Mr. Dickman?
Could we have some different verbiage there, Carrie, before it gets to the Common Council, which is what, about 2 weeks away or 4 weeks away?
Yeah, I'll work on that. I just don't have anything at this
Okay.
time.
Alderman Bekavich?
That's pretty much been said, but again, I can understand the dilemma trying to landscape it all at once, but if you got certain amenities in so you can get apartments moving and going, quite frankly, a lot of businesses get occupancy within the area and aren't fully landscaped. They're open for business. And the same holds true in a residential home. They'll let you in with occupancy as long as the porch and the stoops are in and certain amenities, and you can landscape as you go. But again, I guess Carrie will work on that language.
Any fire concerns? Indicates no. Any, is that all your items you wanted to discuss by specifics?
Yes.
Okay. General comments or questions? Mr. Chandler?
How many stories, once again, will the tallest building?
Sure, all the
be?
buildings are 2 stories in
2
height.
stories. And the reason that I asked that, I know that 7A says a maximum of 3 stories. So should we change that to 2?
No, this is specifically out of the code. It allows up to 3. They're just
Okay.
proposing 2.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Mr. Dickman?
In item 3A under parking access, it's traffic impact analysis. Is that in process already, or would that be available in time to meet the requirements of that item?
We've been notified of the condition of it. I've spoken with Commissioner Johnson regarding the preferred scope of that study, and we're starting to work on that actually as we speak right now.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, I have 3 public comment questionnaires or request forms. Please keep your comments to the specific conditions and restrictions as expressed on this item 4A. First up is David Kubasek. Welcome.
Good evening, members of the council or committee and aldermen and Mr. Mayor. Dave Kubasek, 7911 South Long Meadow Drive. I've got one issue with the traffic analysis. And, not so much with HSI, but it's with the city with traffic there. As you see on the screen there,
Mr. Kubasek, can you speak on the mic, please? Thanks.
I am just okay. This area here is my main concern right there. On listing,
Where's the applicant pointing to, because I can't see that?
Applicant is pointing to
Or not the applicant, but the resident, rather.
The resident is actually pointing to the intersection of the proposed drive and Drexel Avenue,
Okay.
the entrance.
Thank you.
right now on that plan, it says the area, we're going eastbound on Drexel, right here. And that lane is proposed to be left lane only. As you're coming down Drexel Avenue, you go over a hill, which is the highest point in Oak Creek, and it goes down.
I heard that was the second highest point in Oak Creek.
What's
The
first?
spot behind Tri-City Bank and 27th Street is the highest one.
Okay.
Sorry, you were close.
Rumor. My concern is, and you've, Mr. Mayor, pointed out in previous planning, that once you go over that hill, it's only a one-lane road, and then all of a sudden, you've got this split right here. And what happens is people, it's a 35-mile zone, you're coming in, and people want to pass you on the right. You get a car that's going into my subdivision right here, making a right-hand turn. You have problems. Number of times you hear squeal marks. That whole curb is cut out by cars hitting that curb. Now you're going to increase the traffic there, causing more of a problem. I would like to propose that you look into some ideas of doing this. This might be pre-survey or study. One thing would be to make the split come out further up here, so you've got time, because you've only got a few feet
Longer left turn lane
left line,
or indicator?
right lane, okay?
Oh, okay.
So you're going further west.
Yep.
Another thing would be to widen that area right here to a 3-lane. So you've got the option of a left only straight to Pennsylvania, and then a right straight to Pennsylvania. A right lane going into our subdivision. And the third thing would be reduce the speed. Get it down to 25.
Currently 35?
It's currently 35. Going into, once you pass south into South Milwaukee, you've got 25. Also, Pennsylvania is 25. So that's the only lane that,
That's a good point.
so,
That's a traffic and safety issue, I think.
and another thing is, if you widen it, you're coming into taking out a sidewalk. And I'm,
Mr. Degner would not be happy if we took a sidewalk out, based on his previous comments.
I'm required by the city to snow blow that or shovel it. I have no access to that. I've got to go out in front of the street. I went in front of, who is it, Simmons? Simmons? And tried to get it so that, you know, I didn't have to require, because further east of me, they don't have to shovel it because it's their backyard. It's my side yard. And I was wondering if I could be excluded from that, because I've been close to being hit 3 times.
Yeah, you're not the first one that's raised that. I actually had a woman from Fairfield meet with me a couple of weeks ago about the same issue, where she doesn't have access to the sidewalk, but we're requiring her to snowplow the
Right.
sidewalk. So it's something we're thinking about and looking at, but
Okay.
clearly this is outside the scope of this.
Right.
But I hear you.
See what you can do.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Thanks.
Okay?
Good comments. I'm not supposed to play favorites, but Mr. Sprague is one of my favorite residents, so Mr. Sprague, come on up. I'm just buttering you up before you blast me.
Thomas Sprague, 2201 East Oak Ridge Lane. I live just down the street from the prior speaker. My concern is also manifested in the traffic issue. It's already a nightmare at shift time. I would say from 4 to 6 o'clock, it's impossible for us to exit north out of that subdivision. We have to go to Pennsylvania Avenue, take a right turn, go to Forest Hill, take a right turn to get on Howell. And it's not going to get any better. And my problem is I don't understand why we haven't had a traffic impact analysis before we have talked about any of this. I mean, isn't the plan predicated on whether or not it's safe to put this thing in here? If we're going to create an unsafe condition by raising the volume of traffic to such a level that people are taking risks, wouldn't we want to consider whether or not we need an apartment building here?
We do a lot of traffic analysis. This one's just triggered by the fact that there's a development going north of Drexel. So we always look at that. I'm not going to argue and say Drexel's not busier. It certainly is. I've heard it at 10th. I've heard it at Verdev. And now I'm hearing it about your neighborhood as well. So that we're aware of it. But that's why we do traffic analysis studies, and that's why we'll continue to do them, because we want to see where traffic is. And Drexel Avenue is now a very busy thoroughfare in the city, busy east-west street. So we're aware of it.
And it's only going to get worse. Nobody's going to be able to
It only
use...
gets worse if you don't do something about it. If you do something about it, it can actually get better.
I don't understand what can be done to make it better, but I'll wait and see what happens. Another thing, where are we with the, I've been told a number of times that we're short on apartments. But I've also been told that the apartments that are being constructed out here are only 25% under contract at this point in time, where a deposit has been put down, where people want to move in.
That's considered a home run when you haven't opened the building yet. So that's actually a really good indicator.
That is.
Yeah. So I would argue that that's a
Okay.
success.
All right.
We're aware of it. We've actually started looking at some city by city study of multifamily and those kind of things to see where we're at, and we'll right size it.
How difficult is it to put in a no turn on right, or no right turn on red, rather? On Pennsylvania and Drexel, it would be a huge benefit to people trying to exit the subject intersection if Pennsylvania could not turn right
Your
on a red.
recommendation is no right turn on red on Pennsylvania and Drexel.
Right.
Okay.
It would at least give us on the way here tonight, we came out, and as soon as we got a break from the west side, then some people started turning right on Pennsylvania, closing the gap. So it would be of the utmost convenient consideration to no right turn on red at that intersection.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's a municipal thing or a state thing.
Kind of
or-
outside the scope of what we're talking about, but we'll
Traffic and safety.
we'll definitely talk about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sprague.
That's a good idea.
Good points.
Mr. Degner. Sidewalks?
Arden Degner, 8540 South Pennsylvania Avenue, just south of this conglomeration. Please turn this down. The following must be provided in this unfortunate siting of apartments in this bowl surrounded by floodway and flood fringe. We object to splitting this development into phases to enable HSI to defer this gross plan to another builder. 1. Escrow to provide for sandbagging and repair of the retaining walls, say in a decade. Every complex in the plan is protected by a retaining wall. Or will the rising water levels in the apartment buildings caused by holes in the dike result in hundreds of calls to emergency? Number 2, escrow required to cover the interior road repair a decade after construction. Example, subdivision north tenants begged the city to annex the streets in the first automatic district subdivision to restore and repair after they became impassable. Chicago Avenue Apartments also to repair the roads. 3, install automatic traffic control at the only 2 bottlenecked exits to reduce tenant road rage when hundreds of cars occupying the 669 stalls egress. 4, escrow for the cost of the shown deceleration and acceleration lanes on Pennsylvania and Drexel Avenues, and 4 lanes on Pennsylvania Avenue. Blocked traffic obtains on the 2 lanes of Pennsylvania Avenue. Must Oak Creek taxpayers pay the upwards of $50 million a decade hence for expansion to 4 lanes? 5. Install desalination equipment at the site of the 2 stormwater ponds to clear the runoff of ice melt that needs to be applied to the 669 stalled roads, or winter storms and ice will make all roads impassable. Parking adjacent to the apartments along the access roads is hazardous, as the site slopes 10 feet, about 10 feet in each row. This means that in order for anything to be accomplished, a lot of ice melt has to be done in winter and snow, which will run off into these detention ponds. Because it's retained by the retaining walls. It only runs in the direction in which the retaining wall will allow it. And it will accumulate in these detention ponds. If you've seen a DNR requirements for chloride, this is something that has to be concerned with now, because it's going to be hundreds of pounds. Turn this down. This doesn't work.
Thank you, Mr. Degner. All right, I got a few buttons pushed. No, I don't have a few buttons. Okay, we're good. Any other questions, or do you have something?
Yeah, I just had one thing. There was a concern, or not even a really concern, but a suggestion that was brought forth about adding curb and gutter into the considerations for site planning. I'm not sure if the Plan Commission wants to add that as a recommendation or require it for council consideration.
What staff recommend?
Staff understands that this is not a requirement per code. So this would be something for the commission and the council to consider as being part of a requirement, or at least a talking point.
Commissioner Johnson, your thoughts?
I believe that they're needed. I think for an upscale development, you need it to protect the roadways, protect the parkways, keep people from parking on the grass, tearing up the grass along the edges, define where that main road is coming through here, your access points to the facility. There's another development here on Buttes Road, and that is exactly what they're trying to go back and retrofit into their development to define where their roadways are by adding some sort of curb structure through there, and it's really hard to do after the fact.
To further Commissioner Johnson's comment, when I met with him back on March 3rd, I believe it was, we talked about that. We talked about the importance of that along the main streets running through the development, and I think we said we were okay with that. We did have discussion about in the fronts of some of these buildings where we have our there's a lot of jogs and bump outs. Some of those may not be curbed, but those are usually more landscaped areas. But we do understand we're okay with curb and gutter along the main streets.
Does that sound to you, Brian?
It's a step in the right direction.
Okay.
We have to add that to the conditions and restrictions, Carrie?
There's also an opportunity to add it to any conditions of approval at site plan review.
Okay.
Mr. Seibert?
I have a question about the roads that you have. Are they going to meet the city standards as far as thickness and so forth? And are they going to be concrete or are they going to be blacktop?
The roads will be
That you
they
have
will
going.
they will be asphalt, and I will defer to Commissioner Johnson in terms of specs. I assume the city has a spec for private roads.
We don't have a spec for private road. What Mr. Siepert's after, if you're going to meet the public road standard, and I don't believe you're going to meet that.
No.
And you're not going to have the right-of-way width for the roadway for the public road standard.
I'm a little worried that eventually this road may be turned over to the city, just like they've done on a few other developments in the past, and the roads were terrible, and it cost the city a lot of money to repair and maintain them. And that's why I think the standard should be considered in this document.
Part of the consideration with the development was that this is a privately financed project. These are private streets, and that they'd be built to private standards rather than the city standards, which are significantly
I
wider.
understand, But it may end up that they'll be turned over to the city eventually. That's
We don't
the
have
thing
any,
that I'm
we don't have
worried
a
about.
plan, we don't intend on this street being turned over to the city. That's not our intention. The development agreement won't be structured or set up to even contemplate that. From the beginning, we've been contemplating these as private streets.
Other questions? Commissioner Corral?
On a couple of points that were made, I think the site review would be fine as long as the applicant knows that we're expecting to see, at least on the main thoroughfare, curb and gutter. I think getting the curb and gutter on the private streets to Commissioner Seifert's is a step in the right direction. This whole development would have to go belly up for the city. And probably somebody else on the auction block that would get it first. So I really don't, I don't think we're gonna push any more on that end, so let's take the curb and gutter.
Okay. Take the wins where you can get them. Anything else? Motion on 4A.
David will make a motion that the Plan Commission recommend to that the Common Council approve the rezoning of.
Hang on a second.
Whoop.
There was an
a
error,
change.
and there was a change to that staff
Dan.
report that was emailed. So I will read the staff recommendation, which can be adopted as a motion, that the Plan Commission recommends that the Common Council adopts the conditions and restrictions as part of the rezoning of the properties at 7721 South Pennsylvania Avenue and 2100, 2200, and 2280 East Drexel Avenue to RM1 PUD, multifamily residential plan unit development, after a public hearing and subject to conditions and restrictions.
Moved as stated.
Guzekowski, will second.
Motion by Bekavich, seconded by Alderman Guzekowski. Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
David Shy.
PDI.
Guzekowski, aye.
Grill, aye.
Secret eye.
Chandler, aye.
Item 4B is a plan review of site building, landscaping, and lighting plan submitted by Mark. Apologize on the pronunciation. Tegrutness. What's correct? Grossen Heights. HSA commercial for a health clinic facility and parking structure on the property at 7901 South 6th Street. Tax key number 813-9056-000. Carrie.
This is a proposed facility for Freighter Drexel Town Square Health Clinic at the property that is in red on the screen. It is in Drexel Town Square, and the review of which will be subject to the Drexel Town Square General Development Plan and Regulating Plan. The site is located in the mixed-use sub-district. It is a 3-story proposed building on the north and northeast corner, parallel to Drexel Avenue. There is a 4-story proposed parking garage on the west half of, or the west portion of the property. Access is provided by 3 driveways, north from Drexel Avenue, east from 6th Street, which is their main entrance, and the shared access with the Emerald Row Apartments on the south side of the property. There are a few concerns that staff has raised for the north access drive with regard to controlled access. This is intended to be used solely for delivery and emergency vehicle access. Therefore, there were some ideas that were proposed in order to keep that access to those specific uses. There's a security gate that has been proposed at the island, and what I mean by the island is if you go north from Drexel and then you go, you come in on the north side from Drexel and go south, there's a little turnaround area that is between the parking garage and the main building that's actually meant for, I believe, an emergency turnaround. There's a kind of an EMS access door on that side of the building. So that security gate only goes over part of that drive and does not extend all the way to the building. And the staff concern is that that gate should extend across so that there's a complete physical separation from the access drive to the to the parking structure, so that we are limiting the unauthorized or inappropriate access there. We recommend either extending the gate across the full drive or and working with the fire department regarding controls for that gate and hydrant placement overall on the site. So that's one Staff also recommended reducing the width. It is rather wide for that service drive that's right by the parking garage on the northeast side. So reducing that in width would also help to physically prevent some unauthorized access there, or at least have a visual cue that people should not be going in there. On the south access drive, there are 6 parallel on-street parking stalls that are shown in the plans. The general development plan does show parallel parking along the entire driveway, or the entire access drive, and staff recommends including an option in the plans that incorporates this parking configuration. Parking overall on the site, for the PUD, their estimates for medical office is 5 spaces per 1,000 gross square feet, which would be about 460 parking stalls. We did receive a parking analysis from the applicant. Peak employees are 100 to 110. Hours of operation are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The analysis of need that they have is based on 4.25 stalls per 1,000 gross square feet. So that would be 392 standard stalls and 13 disabled. They do have plans for future build out of the property. So there are a couple of additions that are planned. The analysis at build out would require 574 standard stalls and 19 disabled stalls. In this plan, what they are showing are 225 surface stalls and 425 in the parking structure for a grand total of 650. So they do exceed the requirements and what their future build out would show. There are pedestrian connections on the site, east adjacent to the outdoor patio area, on the north side of the main entrance on 6th Street, and there are internal walkways. There are service areas that are provided. Basically, it's on the northwest corner of the building. Deliveries will be by that single lane loading dock. Dumpsters and a generator are behind that wall, which is proposed to match the building. However, there is a gap in between the end of the wall and the building. There's a little bit of an access walk in between there. And that actually would make a portion of the loading dock visible from the street, so staff recommends increasing the landscaping there or extending the wall such that that loading dock is fully screened. Landscaping plans are generally in conformance with requirements, however, minor revisions may be required. There is a condition of approval suggested for final landscaping plans to be approved by the Director of Community Development. On your screen right now is just the general layout, internal layout of the proposed building. This is the first floor, which would be the main entry. Second floor is showing a future build out on the west, and third floor areas. Building materials on the elevations on the screen at this time. On the north, which is actually at the bottom of the screen. This is the north elevation, so this is what will be seen from Drexel Avenue. There are 2 types of precast panels in 3 finishes and neutral colors proposed. That comprise 55% of this elevation. Also 3 types of glass for 25% total. 3% would be clear, gray tinted would be 18%, and 4% are proposed to be spandrel. Also 2 types of metal panels, mostly for screening and for accent materials. On the south elevation, which is at the top of the screen, metal panels are proposed at 44% of this elevation, precast panels at 12%, gray tinted glass at 22%, clear glass at 10%, and spandrel at 14%. On the east elevation is at the top of the screen. This is what would be seen from 6th Street. Proposed building, oh, I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong. Metal panels are on this elevation at 44%, precast panels at 12%, and gray tinted glass at 22%, clear at 10%, spandrel at 14%. I apologize. The south elevation actually has precast panels at 40%, aluminum panels at 27%, gray tinted glass at 23%, clear glass at 5%, and spandrel at 5%. And also the south has 2 pre-finished ACM canopies with precast wrap columns. I apologize for that error. So if anybody is confused, There's a canopy at this entrance here, which is for the urgent care, and this is the main entrance with a canopy as well. So again, on this elevation, precast panels at 40%, aluminum panels at 27%, and some glass also. And again, on the east, 44% metal, 12% precast panel, and the remaining would be the 3 types of glass. On the west elevation, which is at the bottom of the screen, it's mostly going to be 74% precast panel, 11% aluminum panel, and then we have 16% in a combination of gray tinted and spandrel glass. There's also a pre-finished ACM canopy over the EMS access on the right here. Utility boxes are also shown on the plans. They are required to be screened. Rooftop mechanicals are screened via the pre-finished corrugated aluminum panel screen. Corrugated metal screening is not listed in the PUD, and we will require a 3/4 majority approval of the Plan Commission if it's considered an acceptable material. All other building or ground-mounted mechanicals will be required to be screened. This just gives you a concept rendering of what the overall site will look like. This is the proposed 4-story parking structure on the west, main building which is parallel to Drexel Avenue, and then this is 6th Street coming in on the east. This gives you an idea of what the future build-out would be. On the west, they have a future ASC expansion and emergency department addition. On the east, there would be a future cancer care addition. Giving you a view of what the building would look like on Drexel Avenue going west. These are the proposed building materials. Again, we have the precast concrete with the tinted glass shown here. Clear glass is not depicted. And the types of metal panel.
What's the color choices? Is this the actual kind of color palette they're using, or lack of color?
These are the colors that have been presented. I believe there's one color that hasn't been chosen yet, but I would defer to the applicant. And these are full color renderings of the east portion of the building as viewed from Drexel Avenue going west. And also on the top, that's the south entrance as viewed from 6th Street. These elevations show what the proposed parking structure would look like. The building materials on most of the elevations, with the exception of the west, will match the precast concrete panels that are proposed on the remainder of the building. Also, the smooth pre-finished aluminum panels and gray tinted glass on the stairwell and elevator areas will match the building. The only exception on the west is that they are proposing to use basic structural panels, so they'll just be kind of a flat gray panel, or kind of a beige panel. With that, the staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plans submitted by Mr. Tigrutenhuis. HSA Commercial for the property located at 7901 South 6th Street, subject to conditions 1 through 10. Mr. Mayor.
Questions? Do one quick one. So did you say there's parking along 6th Street in front of the building?
Yes.
So how many spots is that?
Sorry, not on 6th Street, on the access drive between this property and Emerald Row.
All right, why would we have those street park, just to get the extra spots? How many spots are we talking about?
6 are shown on this rendering, but the plans in the PUD show parking along the entirety of that access drive.
Gives us enough room to get through there? Fire and traffic? Mr. Kresick, any comments?
Mike Kresick, Fire Department. Generally related to access roads, those are regulated by code. And access roads are clearly identified in facilities like these for placement of apparatus and access to the multiple buildings that'll be on site. It is possible that that may not be a designated fire department access road. It would still need to meet whatever the requirements of the development would be for width. We would work with the developer to identify those access roads, make sure they meet standards to maintain the widths for apparatus.
Be able to get south to the apartment buildings if that road is part.
Potentially. I would request a little bit of time to evaluate that and look at both site plans to determine our access and if that would be required.
Mr. Dickman.
I'm concerned, as long as you're up there, you know, with the, that access road on the northwest corner, it's so close to the trestle, you know, where the train goes through. If you look at that, I mean, it just goes uphill, and there's all kinds of guardrails up there, and yet they want to put it looks like a road up there with the security gate. Does that bother you, the security gate? Have you worked something out with that? Because if there's a fire in the parking structure on the far end, say some car goes up in flames, could you get at it easily?
As you know, the fire department, normally when we come up here, we advocate for as much access as possible to a site. Now, certainly we will work with staff. We understand the challenges at that particular entrance, right off Drexel Avenue in it. We understand that there is a proposal for a gate. The fire department's preference is that there is as much free access as possible to both the parking structure and then to the facility. There is also and I hope I get this right for the developer, there is a urgent care center or some variation thereof on the west side of the structure. There is the potential and likelihood that ambulances will be requested to that location. Now, we certainly could access that from 6th Street and loop back around, but that does give us another potential point of access to that urgent care center. And obviously, there may be restrictions by the developer on which way traffic will flow around there. So long story short, we'll work with the potential for a gate. We'll work with restrictions along that west side, but our preference will always be more access.
Mr. Johnson.
Concerning the access road there, I believe that is supposed to be similar to like Market Street out here, where you have a 24-foot wide pavement section, parking on the outside of that. So more than enough access to get emergency vehicles through there and have access for the parking spaces along there. The intent is that the access around Emerald Row is coming off that roadway as well. That needs to be worked out yet on how it all gets tied together here. But that's their fire department access as well, coming around the backside of those apartments. So that's the intent of how that's supposed to work.
Nobody's spent more time on the roadways in Drexel Town Square than you have. So what's your comment on the access off of Drexel?
If it's limited to emergency accesses and deliveries, I think it's livable. It is concerning. We definitely don't want to have staff access or people using the parking structure coming off there. There is visibility with the railroad structure there. Basically, there's a fire hydrant that's roughly 250 feet east of that bridge. You can see that fire hydrant almost back to 13th Street. The issue is you're coming under the bridge. It's unexpected for somebody to be turning at this location before you get to 6th Street. So we want to really limit that access to this site.
The applicants understand the significance of that eastbound traffic having not a lot of reaction time? Okay. Commissioner Corral?
I guess the question is how are we going to control that access?
If we're able to gate it, it's not the best. Understand how they want to flow. The applicant wants to flow around there. Emergency access coming in there and how they have their building laid out. They still need to be able to move through there. Even a gate coming across there, somebody unfamiliar with that site can still pull in there, and then they got to get back out, which is concerning. But we need to be able to flow for the developer to have access to the emergency center the best that we can. So if we can keep it gated, minimize it. Hopefully they only do that once and they don't do it again. They know they have to come down Sixth Street to access the property.
I never got a phone call in council chamber. Okay, other questions? Mr. Chandler?
I have a question for the applicant in regards to screening.
Name and address for the record.
I'm Mark Grotenhase. I'm with HSA Commercial. We're located in downtown Chicago.
My question in regards to screening is specific to the screening of the loading dock along with the screening of the mechanicals. Can you provide a little more information on what the final decision will be for both areas?
TJ Morley with Epstein Yuan Architects, 333 East Chicago Street in Milwaukee. Currently, the screening for the loading dock is achieved through a precast concrete panel to match the building. The gap that was referred to is basically a, for lack of a better term, emergency egress access point. So with a backup generator and a dumpster there, if that is closed off, there's only really one way to get out of that service area. Excuse me, so we do provide basically a pedestrian access through there for service people. We've talked internally about increasing landscaping or putting in a gate there as well. So we're actively addressing that issue.
So Carrie, is that sufficient for item number 2?
Yes, all revised plans will have to come to our department prior to issuance of, or application for building permits, so we can look at it at that time. And if it's part of landscaping, then that condition of approval is that the plan be approved by the director prior to those permits being issued, so.
And also the screening for the mechanicals on the roof. Can you provide a little more information? Because I just see these boxes on the top of the roof. Can you provide details?
Yeah, that's basically, it's a ribbed metal panel or aluminum panel. It's fairly commonly used. It actually will have an appearance very similar to your own mechanical screen on this building. It will have an appearance more or less as louvers, but it provides just sort of a little detail rather than just being a flat wall. And then that same material is brought down as accents within the building. So it's a nicer material that'll be used in the building.
Also, I had a question in regards to the materials. Do you have the actual materials available for the building?
No, we don't. At this time, we're in the process of sort of refining the recipe, so to speak, of the precast. The material's right there, and we specifically chose the language that shows the intent of the precast because we really haven't kind of buttoned that down yet. But what we'd like to achieve is sort of 3 variations of texture and color to achieve kind of the patterning that we're showing on the elevations.
So the colors are subject to change?
On the precast, that's the basic tone, and then there will be perhaps additional sort of color through aggregate and things like that. Right. But the building materials themselves, if we're talking about aluminum panel and so forth, that's been selected and is shown.
So if we're not specific or concrete on the actual materials, can we vote on that today? Since they're subject to change?
We're not intending to change anything
Or
other
the
than
colors.
just it's a refinement of the actual material itself. The appearance of the precast. But we're not talking
So it's
about
precast
changing.
either way, it's just the appearance that you may
Right,
change.
it's just the amount of, right,
Okay.
texture
From
and appearance. and
smooth
so-
versus more granular? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Guzekowski.
Carrie, could you bring up the site plan? I'm just curious. I just want to look at the flow real quick. So if we're coming off of Drexel, we're we're going east to get into the hospital. If you're in an ambulance, you've got a right-hand turn only then off of Drexel. Is there going to be a left-hand turn off of Drexel if you're going west, or no?
No, there's no median cut, so you can't turn left. It's going to be a right only.
So what's the quickest way to get there then if you're coming in an emergency vehicle to get there and have access heading west? You're gonna have to do a U-turn or go through the parking lot?
Mr. Kresick.
In the city of Oak Creek, all fire stations are east of this location. So every emergency apparatus, unless they're out on another assignment, will be coming from an east direction. If that urgent care clinic or the future standalone emergency department requires a southern entrance to an ambulance bay, yes, we would have to proceed west on Drexel, make a U-turn and come in at that particular entrance, depending on the flow of traffic. So that would be the potential, yes.
You guys always do what you have to do to get there anyway. Within reason.
Within reason, my assumption would be, and our crews are very good at what they do, that 10th Street may prove to be a viable option, especially with a traffic control signal there. The crew could run that south down 6th Street and then approach from that direction.
Thanks.
Mr. Dickman.
I guess this has to do with Pete, I guess, and signs. Okay, in item 6, it says the wall sign location on the south elevation as proposed is approved. When I looked at the drawings, maybe I'm looking wrong, but the only signage I see is where it says urgent care way down at the far end.
The applicant will need to get
Okay,
variances for their signs. We actually spoke with the applicant this afternoon. So what's being approved tonight, signs are not, that's a separate.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure. They show a sign that's on the east side of the building, which is along 6th Street, and does it meet our requirements? Because it's along the street, that's what I thought.
Sign on the image tonight, graphic has no relevance to what we're talking about, correct?
It's generally showing the locations of where the signage could be on the building. The south, there's no issue with the location. On the east and west, though, based on what the wording of the PUD, those are the ones that might be problematic and we require a variance. But these have not been set in stone. We don't have any graphics to go with these. We don't have any dimensions or anything like that. So the signs themselves are not part of tonight's discussion, other than the proposed location on the south is okay.
And they'll come back with a whole sign plan to
Yes.
us for the whole, okay.
Anything else? Motion.
Oh, I have a
Can I go?
question.
Mr. Chandler?
So for the material requirements, does the applicant meet the applicable materials, glass, concrete?
With a 3/4 majority of approval with regards to the metal panels, yes.
And then one additional question, what are the actual days of operation? The hours were in there, but no days.
I'll have to dig through the packet, but I think that's along with the letter from our architect that outlines the parking. Hours are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I would assume it's 7 days a week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Vakievich?
I know it still has to be worked out, but enlighten me on how you're gonna remove snow. Is it gonna be trucked out of here? And seeing as the site's probably about 95% impervious, you don't have a retention pond on here. What are you gonna do about stormwater management? You have sewer drains going to sewers.
The site is served by the existing detention pond to the south.
Commissioner Johnston?
The site was all incorporated as part of Drexel Town Square. So their stormwater management goes to the ponds that are already existing in Drexel Town Square. Yes. Yes. They're still under the 85% impervious area, which is what was generated for the site originally.
Good planning.
The concern that we have is the access drive on to Drexel. And we've been working with the applicant on this, trying to keep all the water on the site as much as possible. We're fighting grades through here. As everybody's well aware, Drexel Avenue used to flood out in the past with the lift station that we have on the railroad overpass. We don't want to add more water and tax the system that we have out there now. So that's our concern. That's what we're working with the applicant to get approved.
Snow removal.
Well, the answer was, as we talked with staff, for the parking deck itself, it would be over stacked between the railroad and the edge of the western edge of the parking. In fact, we added some structures there to handle that stormwater. Then to the south, we're anticipating stockpiling in the green area, just on the north edge of that detention.
Else?
No.
Mr. Seibert.
I just have a question about the timetable for this project, when it's going to be started.
We need to start by the end of this month.
End of this month?
Correct.
That's aggressive.
The delivery is October 2017.
First patient's waiting.
Another question. In regards to the parking, can anyone access the parking? You're not going to the facility?
It's my understanding the parking deck is public.
Okay, thank you.
There's a, Doug, why don't you jump on real quick, talk about this real quickly. I don't want to belabor the point, but. Quickly, Doug.
I'm moving. Thank you, Doug Seymour, Director of Community Development. The arrangement with the property owner is such that the parking structure is available for use upon written request by the city. So for instance, if there were a special event at Drexel Town Square, provided we provided proper written notice, those spaces would be available. And just to coordinate the availability of that space for parking for the clinic and the medical office building versus special events. We don't anticipate any problems with that. Well, it is open to the public. It's not, you wouldn't just be able to drive in there necessarily and walk over there to Bel Air or something like that. We would only be reserved specifically for special events that required prior written notice.
Okay. Anything else? Motion.
David will make a motion that the Plan Commission approve the site and building plans submitted by Mark. Boy, I'm going to kill your name. It's Tagunas. HSA Commercial for the properties located at 7901 South 6th Street with the following conditions. 1, that all building and fire codes are met. 2, that the screen wall be connected to the building or that additional landscape be provided to screen the loading dock. 3, that staff recommends regarding the north gate extension with reduction and south parallel parking access drives are incorporated into the revised plans. 4, that all revised plans, site, building, landscape, etc., are submitted in digital and paper formats for the review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications. 5, that detailed plans for signage are reviewed and approved by the Plan Commission prior to the submission of permit applications. 6, that the wall sign located on the south elevation as proposed is approved.
And let me interrupt you for just a second. It's just the location, not the sign itself.
Okay, that the location on the south elevation as proposed is approved. The wall sign location on the east-west elevations are not approved, and the applicant tenant may submit a sign appeal request for the signs on the east and west elevations. 7, that all mechanical equipment, ground building, and rooftop is screened from view. 8, that the final photometric and lighting plans indicating the approved luminaire type, pole type, color, and height for Drexel Town Square is submitted for final approval by the Director of Community Development upon written recommendation of our resident expert electrical inspector prior to the issuance of building. 9, that plans addressing grading, drainage, and stormwater quality, including the use of stormwater best management practice, be approved by the city engineer prior to the issuance of building permits. 10, that all water and sewer utility connections are coordinated with Yell Creek Water and Sewer Utility.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
David Chai.
Speedy, aye.
Kuzikowski, aye.
Ferrell, aye.
Seifert, aye.
All right, we're going to jump to 4D. Just a heads up, at 7:40, I'm going to turn over the meeting to Alderman Bekavich. So 4D is a zoning text amendment to review a proposed amendment to Chapter 17 to create a Section 17.0316 B6 Interchange Regional Retail District. Who's speaking to this? Gary?
Thank you. On the screen is the proposed district boundary for the B6 zoning district. The commission should be well aware, but if you're not, the existing code regulates according to the scale and intensity of permitted and conditional uses for commercial uses in the B1 local business, B2 neighborhood business, B3 office and professional business, and B4 highway business zoning districts. The proposal tonight is to create a new commercial zoning district, the B6 Interchange Regional Retail Zoning District. It's a bit of a mouthful. This is for regional draw created by national or international destination retailers, and the requirements for such may differ from that of the city's existing zoning code, which is why we're proposing it before you. Many of the specific requirements of this proposed district apply only to destination retailers in excess of 250,000 square feet, and these types of retailers may require greater visibility for customers so that they can have appropriate and safe access to those locations. This may require certain things that are different from the current code standards, which may not be effective or appropriate, such as lighting and landscaping. Brand standards also factor into this because they may require colors, materials, or styles that are not currently anticipated by our code. The adjacent supportive retail within the same zoning district would have standards that are more consistent with the city's code for architecture, signage, and landscaping as currently required. This does allow some flexibility for that so that we can have the cohesiveness of this type of development. The staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that Section 17.0316 of the Municipal Code be amended to create a new interchange regional retail zoning district after a public hearing. Mr. Mayor and Mr. Chairman.
Questions or comments? Commissioner Chandler.
I have a question about page 5.
Page 5.
Let me go over the details and then I will locate exactly where that is. It's noted in our document that there won't be any restaurants with drive-throughs. However, on page 5, what is this, 1H, it identifies drive-through facilities.
The drive-through facility language allows for more like a drive-up window or a customer pickup area, not necessarily a drive-through like a traditional restaurant kind of drive-through.
Thank you.
And that's indicated in the report, correct?
It's identified in the code itself.
Okay. Commissioner Sieber.
I have a question for Carrie. Have we looked at the city overall and identified the B6 areas that we may have in this city?
This is specific to this location at this time. There may be other areas in the future that we might consider for this type of zoning district, but right now it's limited to this specific area.
If I may just clarify, one of the key elements of the B6 zoning district, the proposed district, is that is geared primarily for destination retail, which is at a regional scale. And as such, the only way that a property would be zoned B6 is if it had a destination retailer of the size, 250,000 square feet or more. Anything less than that, I mean, even your typical regional retail typically is less than that. So the only instance where you would have the ability to create this B6 zoning district is if you had a destination retailer of that equivalent size.
But wouldn't you want to do a little planning when you're laying out the city when you do? I look at the 2020 plan that we've had in the past. We've identified those areas for manufacturing, for residential, and so forth. So don't you think we'd at least have a rough idea?
We do, Commissioner Seipert, and you're correct. In the comprehensive plan, we identify areas for different types of commercial uses and different types of intensity, but we don't necessarily, in that comprehensive plan, say this area is going to be zone B6 or B4 or B3. Certainly, it's identified that the areas adjacent to interchanges and the freeway itself are suitable for more intensive regional type uses. So I think, provided that you had a user of that magnitude on properties which are adjacent to the freeway and the freeway interchanges, those are the types that would be eligible for a B6 zoning district should the council so choose.
But at least I have an idea. If somebody came in and said, I'd like to build this, and asked where could I locate it in the city? So I'm just.
I mean, if the question is, are we going to preemptively zone areas B6, I would say, no, we are not.
Okay. Other questions? Motion. Wait, and Lampy, my apologies. You filled out a form? I have it right here.
He does, and with my address. First, just to mention for housekeeping, I went online to read this agenda, including the supporting documents, and there was probably 20 blank sheets between the agenda item previous to this and this one for supporting documents. So if I hadn't had some patience and kept scrolling, I never would have found all the language. So
We'll bring that attention to the clerk.
considering, that was one of the questions on the survey I filled out a couple weeks ago, there's my answer. I was a little surprised to see how small the setbacks were in this zoning district, considering you're bringing in regional, international customers to this facility. I would have expected the setbacks to give the surrounding property owners a little more privacy, is one thing. I was at the meeting in November where the strategic plan was changed to make this area mixed use. And to me, mixed use is more of a local designation and often includes residential areas. I get the impression that this does not, which is in fact a change from the strategic plan change that you just accepted in December. So this is actually quite a big change. And I just don't know that it's appropriate considering the institutional zoning right across that street is a school, which is as local of a designation as you can get. Schools these days aren't the buses drive up and drop off the kids and pick them up. It's the parents coming to pick up their kids for dance or taekwondo or whatever. And you're going to have different uses of that street. You're going to have the very local parents with their kids running out to get in the car versus people coming from Appleton to go to IKEA. And that's going to be a problem. And I know you'll say we're going to have an entrance off of 27th Street, but the GPS from those people from Appleton are going to drive them off the expressway at Drexel, and they're going to turn on that street, and the first thing they're going to come to is a school. And to me, that's just not right. It was P when those houses, when the school was put in, then you said mixed use, and now you're saying international. And I don't believe the residential uses along Drexel Avenue are going to remain residential since most of them are currently rented and are rented by the owners of the property you're talking about rezoning. And so the fast food restaurants you don't have in there, you may have along Drexel, immediately adjacent to the school. So my position on this hasn't changed from what it was in November. Not even knowing what it was then, this is too big of a use next to that school.
Thank you, Ann. Comments, Doug?
Thank you. I guess I would just say with respect to the comments regarding mixed use, this is one element. This is granted a large element of that site and that potentially larger area. There are an additional 20 acres to the south that could have the potential for those mix of uses. And the mix of uses don't necessarily have to be residential. I mean, we certainly have seen mixes of uses, mixed use projects, including Drexel Town Square, that includes residential, but many times it does include other uses such as office space. Medical offices are another example of what could be constituted mixed use. So it does not necessarily have to include residential. One thing, and I know it's, we do have a board back there, and granted we are talking at this stage regarding the zoning text itself, but certainly there are concerns that have been expressed regarding the the location in the vicinity of the elementary school. Again, bear in mind that when the school was zoned institutional and when the comprehensive plan was changed, when the land swap occurred, there was the 60 acres that was planned for a substantially different use than it was previously, which was a park, or in this case, agricultural use. And that certainly that 60 acres has the potential, whether it's zone B4 or B1, to generate a significant amount of traffic. I think it was incumbent upon the city in planning and doing the traffic impact analysis that we are doing not only for this site, but for the entire Drexel Avenue corridor, to take into account the allowable range of uses and to design a facility that will safely serve both the elementary school as well as the people who might be using IKEA and the adjacent regional retail, as well as when it extends through to 27th Street. So it's a facility that works, a safe facility. But you're right, it's not going to be a local road that's adjacent to some of our more traditional elementary schools. So, I mean, that's, from that standpoint, I just wanted to share with you, and this is just something that I've kind of created on my own, just to kind of give some perspective of how this relates to, if I can get going on that. This is just a Google Earth image, hopefully, showing kind of a mashup of what is the IKEA site in the school. So talking about the school itself, and the design of the elementary school was such that there is actually a physical separation between 20th Street and the entrances to the school and off the parking lot. So there's actually quite a distance there. And the IKEA site, and I know we're not talking about the site plan, but is actually about 1,000 feet north of the school driveway. And you know, Brian can speak a little bit to the road design as to how we've designed it to accommodate the levels of traffic that we anticipate. And I can tell you, and I'm sure that the folks representing IKEA will tell you that the peaks from their store, from the regional retail that will follow, do not match the peaks of the elementary school. For instance, in the store doesn't even open until 10 o'clock, with associates arriving earlier, but certainly the bulk of that traffic would take place on the weekend, with the rest interspersed throughout the week. So the peaks don't match. Again, just some kind of side items, we're talking about the zoning. But I mean, these are considerations. I know that they're concerns of people. We have taken those into account. We have designed that facility to kind of address some of those concerns.
Alderman Bekavich.
Doug covered a lot of what I was going to say concerning the site location from the school. Keep in mind, the city's also working very closely with the school district to put in basically a fence to kind of protect that school and more or less keep it more or less captive. And just to address school pickup, it's my understanding, and maybe we have a school board member that'll clarify this for me, that school pickup will be done in a school parking lot. The buses and the parents' cars will come in to that south lot. The buses will, I think, go north. North side, and the cars come in from the south side, if I'm not mistaken. So there will not be street pickup like you see at Cedar Hills or things of that nature. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that was my understanding when we looked at the school plans.
I think your map shows pretty clear that it was a big misconception. First people thought it was on 27th Street, and then the second one was they thought it was immediately across the street from the school, which it's clearly not. So, I mean, thanks for putting that together on the fly. We're going to do everything we can. We don't have to put a fence up, but we're spending $20,000 to put a fence up to make that school safer. And the school's been involved in this discussion since the beginning, at least the superintendent. So they were comfortable with it, and I think certainly the Common Council is comfortable with it as well. Any other comments? Motion. You fill out a form? Ryan Vaughn?
Ryan Vaughn, 1830 West Drexel. I have a couple comments, actually. All the traffic, as of right now, has to still go past the school to get to this facility. And again, like Ann had said, we changed this in November to mixed use, and now we're going away from mixed use to this big retail conglomerate. that's not really mixed use. And the 2020 vision, like Commissioner Sieber had said, was this is gonna be mixed use. It's gonna be all local stores, just like here, at the Drexel Town Square. So IKEA just doesn't really fit that bill. The other question I have is, on the map back here that you published out to the public, there aren't any houses along Drexel Avenue. They're just not there. I can see where my house is supposed to be,
Right, that's not my map
but it's
or
not
my
there.
graphic.
But I know, but it showed the public that, hey, there's no houses here that's gonna be impacted. So nobody can really, see what it's going to do to the general public.
Everybody up here is aware there's 7 houses on that street, on that side?
Yeah.
You're making that point as well, so.
Yeah, houses come and go, that's fine, but the school is my main concern. The traffic going past the school is going to be very, very heavy. And yeah, the traffic patterns in the morning sure don't match, on a weekend don't match, but there are after-school activities that happen from 3 o'clock until 5 o'clock at elementary schools, where people going to IKEA are going after work between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock. So just keep that in mind also. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Yeah, go ahead. What's your first name?
Nick,
Nick Schmidt. Address?
it's on there.
7842 South 13th Street.
Yeah.
All yours.
Okay. Okay, here's the thing I want to know. I'm just going to understand the commission over here. I know the common council is voted on. The commission is just like volunteer. Are you appointed maybe by mayor or somebody? Do you get paid for this position? Can you help me on that?
Yeah, the 2 gentlemen to my left, there's 2 aldermanic appointments that I select.
Appointed.
Yeah, I point.
Everybody really on this committee is appointed, not elected, right?
Just these 2 gentlemen.
Okay.
In this case, there are 2 gentlemen that get picked by me. There are other representatives. There's one city representative who was Brian Johnson, our assistant city engineer. And the rest are citizens, and they do get paid a small amount of small amount of money.
Yes, very small.
Which
Okay,
hasn't changed in decades. What is it, $30?
35.
$35.
okay. Well, what I have to say is, Oak Creek is going really fast. I mean, I'm retired and I don't seem to have much time on just being retired. So I have to give maybe everybody on this commission a good yahoo because of the fact that to be able to do what you're doing, the way the city is growing, there's come really educated reasons for what the comments that you make yes or no on some of these things that we're doing right now. I don't know how you possibly can do it. I mean, if everybody's got jobs, maybe somebody's retiring that, but what I'm saying is I think we are moving way too fast. And this IKEA, I think we should maybe bow down and have a prayer for it because this IKEA, last week, my son and daughter-in-law, in the morning, let's see, it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, you got the news media banging on the door, to take pictures and stuff and want to know a lot of information about IKEA. It's like a couple times now, it's a couple mornings like that. It's like you think there was a killing or something on Drexel Avenue. This is a store going up. It doesn't make sense. What I'm saying is we are, and I think we're in so much. Okay, here's another one. Is this a TIF district? Going to be a TIF district?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, there's another one.
No. It's proposed to be a TIF district.
Okay, a TIF district, I think, maybe there's some people here. Could you explain what a TIF district is?
If I may, and I'd love to explain what a TIF district is, that's not really what this item is all about. And certainly, I mean, whether it's tonight, tomorrow, or anytime before the public hearing, there'll be opportunities, and I'd love to meet you with one-on-one, explain what is in the project plan and what the TIF district is all about. But unfortunately, this is not the time or the place for
Okay,
that.
all right, okay, but this is for rezoning. Okay, if everybody knew what a TIF district is and what it's gonna cost the city of Oak Creek to make this a TIF district, all the infrastructure and that, they may wanna know about this. I don't think the people in Oak Creek know what's going on, how much Oak Creek is in debt. And everything that's going on, I mean, it's one of these things, we gotta take advantage of it while it's here.
I think everybody on this commission and that think for themselves, make an educated reason for what they're saying, yes or no. I don't think we should be moving as fast as we are on this all. I mean, everybody, maybe it's okay, but we have to think about this a little bit. I mean, IKEA, I mean, the journal, I mean, this is like God sent, God's coming down to earth with this IKEA, I mean, big deal, it's a store. You don't have to have news media. I mean, I don't know why Oak Creek has to be so up on this place.
I'm going to bring you back. So you're not in favor of this proposal?
I didn't say that.
So you are in favor of the proposal?
Well, put it this way. I'm neutral. Put it this way, I'm neutral. What I'm saying is that everybody should think
Their
about
due diligence,
this.
we get that. Everybody up here spends a lot of time reviewing the materials that they're sent the week before, so I think they do.
Hey, I give them all the credit in the world for this. If they've got the time to do this, excellent, but I mean, you people right now have a lot of things going on in Oak Creek. I mean, to make a good, responsible, educated guess on everything is give you credit, because I don't know how you can do it, because there's going to be mistakes, and I know you do make mistakes, and you do good. But all I can say, I'm just repeating myself.
all
Do a
right.
good job. Okay.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the comments.
Thank you.
Well, Commissioner Corral.
Quick comment. I mean, that really, we are appointed. It is a lot of time. We don't necessarily have the time, but you have elected officials who make those appointments. Go out and vote. If you like what's going on, vote that way. If you don't, you have that opportunity. They're going to appoint somebody, but
Okay.
that's your opportunity to vote.
Okay.
Every
well,
resident has a chance to be on this commission. They can fill out an application, and I select those people, so.
I don't have any time.
Or whoever's in that position.
It's a lot of time.
Well, I just said I don't have. But
That's
what I'm
not
saying
backing
is,
up your argument.
no. But what I'm saying is that I have to give you credit for doing what you're doing. And if you want to take this opportunity to do these kind of things, make sure they're the right reasons for what you're doing it, and it comes out right.
Thank you. Any other questions? Motion.
We on D?
Yes.
Yeah, we're on 4D. Richie Dickman makes, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Wally.
Richie Dickman makes a motion, the Plan Commission recommend to the Common Council that section 17.0316 of the municipal code be amended to create a new interchange regional retail zoning district after a public hearing.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
David Chai.
Video.
Kuzikowski, aye.
Roll aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
At this point, I'm going to hand it off to Alderman McCabe. So you're going to take E and then C.
C. Okay. Mayor has instructed me to take the wheel here for a little bit. So he instructed me to take item 4E. It is a rezone for P1 to B6 interchange regional retail district after a public hearing. Carrie?
Thank you. On the screen, as soon as it comes up, is an idea of. There we go. This is the property that is being proposed for the rezone of the new B6 interchange regional retail zoning district. A little bit of background: November 24th, 2015, the Plan Commission adopted a resolution and recommended council adoption of several amendments to the comprehensive plan for properties in the vicinity of Falk Park. And included in that amendment was a change, as we've discussed, to plan mixed use for this property in particular, other properties in the area, in anticipation of a future mixed-use development on land owned by Walden OC, which is Northwestern Mutual. The council approved this comprehensive plan amendment on December 15th, 2015. The existing zoning in the area includes P1, which is Park District for Falk Park, I-1 Institutional, which is the new Forest Ridge Elementary School, and several residential districts. I-94 creates the east property line, across which lies additional business districts, residential, institutional, and manufacturing. Staff feels that this unique blend of districts and future mixed-use development are appropriate for this area. The staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the property at 1830R West Drexel Avenue be rezoned from P1 Park District to B6 Interchange Regional Retail District after a public hearing. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Carrie. At this time, is there any public comment? Hash what we just so want to. Commissioners, questions, comments?
Straightforward.
Owen? Pat?
I guess my question isn't what we just approved in D or changed the zoning. The reality of with IKEA, with the previous zoning, what would not have been enabled there? In other words, we cleaned up what can now happen once IKEA is there, correct? Or limited what can now go around it?
The zoning district specifically outlines what is going to be allowed and what would be not allowed in that proposed zoning district, which would include IKEA, which does address certain things such as, access, building height, size, signage, landscaping requirements, those kinds of things. For retailers, destination retailers that are 250,000 square feet and above, and also those retailers or other uses that are below that threshold. It does look at those unique requirements for not just IKEA, but other options that would be in this type of district. I'm not sure that answered your question.
Well, it did, I guess, into previous comments, but the point is we've kind of reined in what IKEA's options are, our expectations are of that size facility and that type of traffic with the new zoning compared to what previously was available. We didn't have B6.
Yes, the B6 zoning district does take into account the specific needs of both IKEA and for the city.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Motion.
Go ahead.
I hope that everybody on the commission knows that Northwest Mutual owns just about all that property from Drexel Avenue to Rawson Avenue, from 13th, not from 13th Street, from the Expressway west. Nick, the last name is Schmidt. Okay, so what I'm saying is, I want everybody to know that Northwest Mutual does not run the city of Oak Creek. I hope Oak Creek runs Oak Creek.
Oak Creek is in charge of Oak Creek. They are just a very good partner for Oak Creek at this time.
Bull crap. They got deep pockets. They got deep pockets.
Sir, that is your opinion. And,
That is my
and
opinion.
you're
But
welcome to
okay,
it.
so I am a citizen in this town and a city, and I'll give my opinion. But everybody's got to realize this is the truth. I mean, if you see anything that's going on in that area, it's Northwest Mutual has their finger in it because they want to make money on it. If we move it from residential to commercial, who's going to make all the money? That's why IKEA's in. I mean, and everybody knows well enough when IKEA was going to come into the city anyway, and so it's not like a secret, So Northwest Mutual was working on this for a long time. That's why they've been buying up everything for a length of time. So what I'm trying to say is, do good for the city and not for Northwest Mutual.
Thank you for that, and I do believe that the decisions made for IKEA to come here will do the city very, very well in the future. And some of the land deals we've made, I personally feel will benefit the residents of this city, not only now, but in future generations. Many people have done it over the years, have situated land for different uses and purposes, whether it was satisfy their family or their businesses. And again, hopefully it was prosperous for all, and I think we will be on that right track. So with that, continue on the motion.
Carl moves that the Plan Commission recommends that Common Council that the property at 1830R West Drexel Avenue be rezoned from P1 Park District to B6 Interchange Regional Retail District after a public hearing.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Kuzikowski. Oh, Corella, I'm sorry, I was still reading.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Excellent.
Sorry.
I do not have a date.
I believe it's scheduled for June 7th, if I'm not mistaken.
Tentatively, June 7th. Okay, moving right along, our last item of the night, we're going to jump back to item 4C. Plan Commission consultation, discussion of code requirements and applicable zoning districts for craft distillery, wineries, and breweries. So,
I'll talk about that.
We got you here for a reason.
Yeah, how about that, huh? Let's talk about booze manufacturing. We are, as it's been talked about a lot this evening, we've been growing very rapidly, and lots of new uses, a lot of new businesses coming to town. One of the things that we don't take into consideration is the manufacturing for wineries, breweries, distilleries, and really specifically, we'd like to get the Plan Commission's thoughts on micro breweries and distilleries. They are common. They're growing. They're being very successful all around the country. Right now, we do have Water Street Brewery. However, that is what would we consider a brew pub or a facility that brews and sells on site. They're not distributing their product. They're not, selling it to go off site. They're consuming it on site. So our code allows for that. What we don't allow for is a distillery or a microbrewery that manufactures and then sells it 6-pack, 12-pack by the bottle. We don't have anything on the books. And so staff would like to gauge your views on it as whether we should pursue it instead of just coming to you like I did with some of the text amendments where it's like, hey, let's change the code to do this. And then we had a bunch of discussion. Let's have the discussion now, and then I can come back later with definitions and possible regulations that pertain to these types of uses. Fortunately, right now, our department has an intern, and she did a lot of good research of what businesses around the state, around the country do and how they regulate and how they define these types of establishments. In short, it's all over the board. Some regulated down to 200 barrels a year to 20,000 barrels a year. It appears to be very discretional by community. What is micro? What is artisan? What's a full stage brewery? So, in your report, I talked about the various ranges that are there. One of the things that I wanted to focus on for a little bit this evening is micro distilleries. We do have some interest in that type of use to come to the city. And so just wanted to show you some examples of what, does exist locally. And the one that is on your screen now is the Great Lakes Distillery down on Virginia and 6th Street in Milwaukee. They have approximately a 10,000 square foot facility. They actually reused, let's see if I can bring it up, this building right here. It was an old building where this was a warehouse, and then this area was office. They refurbed it. This whole back area that I'm showing on the screen with the arrow is where they actually manufacture or distill their product. You may be familiar, Rayhorse vodka and gin is one of their big things. And then the front here is they have a retail area where they sell bottles of their distilled spirits, as well as a bar, and I believe they even have some small, bar food, I think, appetizers and whatnot. And my computer just went dead. Or maybe not. It died, unfortunately. I was going to show you the virtual tour of what they have in there. In your report, I did show a couple examples of what the micro distillery looks like. They are of smaller size. One of the things that staff is comfortable with identifying microbreweries and micro distilleries in the city of Oak Creek is that if we use regulation of size and production, that we can keep the city from having a Miller Brewing Company, right on the corner of Howell and Putes, because that is not something that we want to see in our commercial districts. But if I could have showed you the distillery downtown Milwaukee, those type of uses have a purpose in our commercial districts. I think they can serve as a good use as a destination. It can help bring identity of, hey, this is a locally produced product. You see a lot of, when it comes to even like growing agricultural stuff, buy local, consume local products. This would be something that would be a good fit for the city of Oak Creek. Without repeating myself, if there, is any comments or questions that, the commission would like to share with staff, that'd be greatly appreciated, because when it comes to crafting the definitions and what we want to how we want to regulate these type of uses, would be very beneficial for us to be able to provide to you. And I guess in short, I'd like to say that we would see in our commercial districts, right now staff is looking as a conditional use in any of our B1, B2, and B4 districts. Really haven't thought about B6 at this point, but those would be a conditional use review to make sure that we had, a use that didn't get too big, didn't have the issues you have with breweries and other type of noxious odors that you might receive. And so one of the comments I had in the report was talking about maybe regulating the size of a micro distillery to 10,000 square feet. So you could operate in where Mattress Firm and Papa Murphy's is. That would be acceptable, but Woodman's would not be. We wouldn't want a 200,000 square foot micro distillery. So in the definitions, we can include tasting rooms as an accessory use, so that way you could have the type of experiences that are elsewhere in other distilleries around the city. Here on the screen now is an example of the distillery room for Great Lakes. It's in about a 6,000 square foot facility. This still is the copper part in the middle right there. That's really doesn't take up a lot of space. Here they have the holding of the ingredients. In the back, it's tough to see, but that's where they store their product. It's a pretty bare bones, but when it comes to the production facility, that's why we'd like to regulate that if you're going to do a micro distillery in our commercial districts, no more than 50% of the site can be used for production. The rest would be need for a tasting room or a retail type facility. Carrie, if you can go back one, click back to there's two virtual tours that you can take. This is of the production facility. And then there's one that actually shows the tasting room area and retail area. Yep, right there, thank you. So, and that brings up, and this would be, added to, this could be something that could be a social gathering place. I mean, I've taken a tour down at Great Lakes Distillery. It was, date night, headed out there. When we were there was a bachelorette party that's where they started the night. Then they, moved on to the rest of their social evening. So this is something that staff does see as a compatible use in our commercial district. But I will stop talking at this point and get any reaction from you guys.
Thank you, Pete. I'll open it up. First of all, Pat.
It's pretty easy. It's common in most areas. I think sizing it by square footage is probably the easiest control. I think the only concern is not getting too big into a commercial situation. It definitely fits into most of our B1, 2, 4, probably 6. And I think the only direction would be that square footage to the production size would control the barrel, the production. I just look at it that way. Put the limits at that end, and I think it's something that would be beneficial to the city.
Thank you.
Ollie?
I think the timing is right, because every week when you look at the business section or something, they've got another article about another microbrewery or something. So it's the fad, it's what's going on. So I think the timing is right to look at how we control it. Could you maybe call some of these other areas, cities, and find out why did they pick, gallons, or why did they pick space, et cetera, et cetera?
That there wasn't much of it. I think it depended on if what they considered a lot or a little. We have some examples for a microbrewery in Kalamazoo. There's one that allows 15,000 barrels a year. You go to Montana, and then they wanted to limit it to 10,000. And Evanston, Illinois, apparently like their microbrews, they allow 30,000 barrels a year. So what would we consider micro? I think is a relative term. When you have Miller Brewing in your backyard, it produces hundreds of thousands of barrels a year, 30,000 might seem like a micro, version. So there isn't a lot of consistency around the state or the
What
nation.
if we did pick, as you said, one level, but somebody had, came in and they want to go just a little above that, say instead of 10,000, 15,000, could they come for a variance, or how could we handle that?
Well, I would agree with Commissioner Correll way of regulating these type of micro distilleries and limiting their production square footage. You can only produce so many barrels in a 5,000 square foot facility.
Okay.
If you want to go larger, then you probably are going to need to relocate to our manufacturing district where we would maybe allow that as a permitted use. Then they can grow as large as they want. But if they want to have something small, well, sure. Just don't look at any of our large vacant retail spaces. You're going to be looking at some of our smaller ones, and it could be 10,000, 5,000 square feet. It really doesn't have any sort of state definition that says a microbrewery says you have to be no larger than 10,000 square feet and produce no more than 5,000 barrels. There is no state definition that has that. We have, I didn't include them in the reports. I could have given you a nice stack of papers of showing you of all that information where it shows from Chicago, Illinois to, we had South Dakota. It really depends. Here we have a sample here from South Dakota that said a microbrewery is defined as established that manufactures less than 5,000 barrels of malt beverage a year.
But if somebody started out like that and then they found they were very, very successful, I think what you're saying is then they could move to another district,
Right, and the way we're looking at it.
Which is good, which is what you want, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's why we're looking at the size of facility. Regulating the maximum size in a commercial area would be a way to keep someone from going, completely full scale, macro brew or a macro, distillery. We don't really see that as a good fit for our commercial districts. That'd be a perfect fit for our manufacturing.
Okay.
Like right now, we allow bottling of beverages in our manufacturing district. That's why we have Black Bear. But we really never identified a brewery or a winery or any other high usage type resource business.
Commissioner Carrillo has visited many of these places. And then my point is that they're limited by production, usually versus square footage, because of, you could be producing 24/7. So I think that might be one of the things so that you don't have like the smell or trucking or all those kind of things that you might incur if the production was 7 days a week, 6 days a week.
Yeah, the one thing right now I was able to find, the state does have reports that come out monthly. They're a 3-month lag time about how many taxable gallons or liters they produce. But again, that's from an enforcement standpoint. No private company wants to send me a report saying we produced this much this year, especially if they produce more than what we say. I'm going to get a report that says 1 gallon or 1 liter less than what was produced. So, it's a great to put in there. So if someone gets, some little press time and says, I produced 100,000, liters of distilled spirits, and hey, wait, the report you gave me showed, 2,000, just like our limit says you can. It gets a little difficult to enforce. That's why we've put the square footage along with the production. I think we have like a 1-2 punch when it comes to making sure that these distilleries or wineries or breweries don't get so large that it really becomes now an issue of traffic with deliveries, with where do products go? Because if you just look even at Water Street Brewery, they have one large silo that they use for their their product. That's fits. It's fine. It kind of gives a character, but you get something like Leinenkugel's down off the freeway where they have these two or three huge silos. Well, now it looks like we're going away from our commercial district into a manufacturing district.
Pete, you mentioned conditional use, so we've got an opportunity to control some of the other aspects as a conditional use as well, in terms of hours and everything else. So I think as long as it's kept that way, we can skinny it up.
Ryan, anything?
Get it, Joe.
And I might just add a little bit here. The other thing about regulating the amount of production, a lot of these places say they have the capacity to go up to. It doesn't mean that's what they're actually producing. So I think that's why when we say a limit up to, and then you have to go to manufacturing. I think that allows for some expansion to a point before you have to go above and beyond and then go to a manufacturing district. And I can say that, Wally, to your point before about have we contacted these other places, it's a great segue to introduce our intern, Alicia, who did a lot of the legwork on this for us. And one of the things that she found out is that some of the, in essence, Milwaukee, for instance, it happened so long ago. They have, 300,000 as a maximum limit. They don't know where that number came from anymore, to be honest. So, and then, trying to find information about what these producers actually have, it's a little bit difficult, but, we want to put in a plug for all the work that she did because she'd researched
Does she
this
go in the
quite
tasting
a bit.
rooms a lot or not?
You know what? That's step 2.
That's
And
step
she
2,
better
huh?
bring us with her.
Chris, anything?
No, I like the plan that you're on right now. I think this is a good 1-2 punch, so.
Brad?
I like it. I think it's great. Square footage and the
Same.
I would also recommend if we can have some verbiage in there. I like the idea of maybe the tasting options and definitely no drive-through.
Drive-throughs are always a conditional use, but yes, that would be something that,
we could also look
something to
at
consider.
population.
In fact, in Boulder, Colorado, they define a distillery with, making spirit liquors, and that long as the floor area utilized for a tasting room is less than or equal to 30% of the total floor area. And that's where we talk about limiting production. We're talking at a staff level about a percentage. No more than, 50% of the facility can be used for production. The rest have to be used for a tasting room or retail establishment. So that hopefully the idea would be your front of your store would be your retail, your display area, your commercial like we normally have. Then you'd have your manufacturing, but you'd have that ability to manufacture that product and then, have tours, do that type of whole experience that micro breweries and distilleries bring when they move into a community.
Sir, I noticed you moved up front. You have something you want to input?
My name is Adam Murphy, 9843 South 27th in Franklin. I'm the one that brought this up. I'm the one that's considering opening a distillery in Oak Creek. I'll throw out a couple things to answer some of your questions or to possibly get into some of the details as well. From a distillery specifically, so I'm not dealing with the brewing side, which is dramatically different when you're talking beers, and also wineries. Those are totally different animals. But when you're talking distilling spirits, so vodka, gin, whiskeys, that sort of thing, that's what we're dealing with here, or I'm dealing with. The tasting room side of things, first of all, is critical, I would argue, for the micro distilleries. Obviously, look at Great Lakes and what you've brought up here. The advantage of a tasting room, and part of the reason that you see differences from state to state is that distilleries are controlled at the federal level. Okay. However, tasting rooms and that sort of thing are controlled at the state level. So each state has their own regulations for that. That's not controlled federally, and obviously it comes down to the local municipality. The state of Wisconsin requires that a tasting room for a distillery be on site. Some states allow that tasting room to be off site. What a tasting room is, again, just so that you have an understanding of what we're dealing with here in a very specific definition, is that we can only provide our own alcohols. We can only provide those things that we actually produce. So if I make gin and vodka, I can't have tequila on the side. Okay? So from that perspective, it's very different. It's not a liquor license. It's not a bar in the general way that we think about it. So because Wisconsin has the 3-tier distribution format where for sales outside of a tasting room, we have to go through distributor and then retailers. For the tasting rooms here in Wisconsin for distillers, generally from 10 to as much as 32% of their sales, not dollar amount, but their actual physical sales, come from the tasting rooms. And the advantage is that you make about 100% more because you're not going through distribution chain and retail chain. So that $30 bottle of vodka, I might get $15 if I sell it through distribution, but I get $30 if I sell it locally in my facility. So you understand why a tasting room in particular is critically important. And so part of my interest was very much where Oak Creek would allow us to have those sorts of things. To be in the manufacturing zone, for instance, I own the old Oakwood School off of 27th Street and Ryan Road. To buy the Fireplace store across the street from me isn't going to be much of a draw for somebody to come to my location, or to be in the industrial park behind the scenes. Now, if I'm absolute, and yes, you're putting out hundreds of millions of bottles a year, the tasting room is not important. But for a small manufacturer, the tasting room is critical. It's for perspective, a case a day is $45,000 a year of additional profit if I sell that in my tasting room versus selling that through distribution. That's an employee. So I wanted you to have some understanding, but also why you're going to see, and I looked through the reports and stuff that you had brought up, why state by state things are so dramatically different. So from my perspective, I think from the micro, square footage makes perfect sense. Doing quick math in my head, the 50% thing doesn't necessarily thrill me, but that's one of those things obviously that you know, can be talked about and discussed, you know, or how do we handle storage. When it comes to federal regulations, the security and the storage is incredibly regulated. Okay, we can't have easy access. Actually, I really wanted the bar that the charcoal grill is going, or the bank that the charcoal grill is going into. It would have been perfect. So there's a lot at the federal level, but each state is different. That's part of the reason that you see so many different changes in there. So, but I was excited about the opportunity to come into Oak Creek. I've lived in the area all my life. We're down in Franklin, like I said, right now. You guys have great water. That's the most important thing to me. And so the opportunity to be somewhere where we can have a good retail presence is critically important. When I had first talked to Doug, we had talked about the possibility of doing something in the Drexel Square, even having a tasting room, for example, inside of the residential, inside of the apartments. State law won't allow that. We can't have that tasting room there, and obviously I can't be manufacturing hooch in underneath somebody's apartment, unfortunately. Federal law doesn't allow that. So anyway, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to help out. And obviously I'll be interacting with these guys quite a bit, but we're excited about the possibility.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Everybody's kind of weighed in. I guess I'll give my 2 cents, and I'm not going to repeat because everybody made really good points. It is timely. This is going on everywhere. I guess my advice would be, if you're going to limit it by square footage, allow for expansion, as Gary kind of alluded to. For all we know, we have the next Jack Daniels sitting here in our town. And suddenly he becomes a regional draw, much like when people go through Tennessee, they visit Jack Daniels, which incidentally sits in a dry county. So, again, people go out of their way to do that, hence the B6 business district, where you'd end up. But anyhow, you know, don't be so limiting that the person can't expand or grow. I agree with him 100% on the tasting rooms, whether that's wine or liquors. I think it's essential. I think you guys are on the right path. But again, I didn't realize liquor was, I've worked in liquor distributors before. They are heavily secured. I just figured they just had a lot of product in it. I didn't realize it was federal law.
Right, and those numbers that I threw out were just you know,
A taste.
throwing that out there as, you know, how we do it, just using Great Lakes as an example. They have approximately 10,000 square foot building. About 6,000 is production, 4,000 is their retail tasting, and actually they actually have the tasting in their place where they actually distill, and then they actually have more of a retail outside of, in addition to their manufacturing and tasting room. So that's where we came, you know, that ballpark of 50% came from. You know, the examples I cited from the research was, you know, no more than 30% of the floor area could be used for tasting. The rest was, you know, 70% was production, and that's where just looking to, you know, give you some kind of numbers, something to react to instead of saying, should we have it or shouldn't we have it? Well, okay, we can get a thumbs up on it, but sometimes we need to think about a little bit more of the details about, okay, how do we regulate it in a way that is comfortable here, so when we come before a conditional use before you,
I
it's
do
not just
agree,
a
and
fun-
again, sometimes if you do it by square footage and they find a building that's affordable but oversized, it may not work. Lakefront Brewery, for example, took over an old power station. Basically, it was a power plant. Made it into what it is. Cedar Creek Winery actually just took over a basement because it was cool. And these are all great stories. And I mean, we may have that somewhere in a building that we don't know of.
You know, and we're going to definitely work with Adam since, you know, he does have an interest in here with this. And so we're going to, you know, definitely include him as discussions as we start talking about, all right, let's talk about what size is appropriate in our commercial districts. Do we want a micro distillery going into TJ Maxx, you know, or a Petco, you know, looking at, you know, not the super large one like Woodman's, like I said, but there's still some large retail buildings throughout the city, you know. Are those the appropriate places? And we'll have that discussion, and we'll bring some alternatives to this commission for your review. But before we start hammering down specific definitions and regulations, make sure that it was even worth our time to do that.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have anything else before I ask for an adjournment?
When we get to the point where we have the final, presentation, could you be here for that and kind of give us your opinion of why you think we're doing it right or wrong? I'd appreciate that. Okay.
With that, motion to adjourn.
Carrillo moves to adjourn at 8:11.
Grell seconds.
Roll call.
Dick and I.
Johnston, aye.
Carrillo, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Grell, aye.
Secret eye.
Chandler, aye.
Great, thank you for joining us tonight. Everybody enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you.